Hi, this is Marlene with Miami Ghost Chronicles, and I want to welcome you to another episode of Stories of the Supernatural. Wherever you find us, whether it's a video or podcast on your favorite platform, please like and subscribe to us so that you can get notification of when a new show is released. You can also find us on major social media platforms. If you go to miamighostchronicles.com, you can find links to the videos or MP3 files, which you can download and enjoy without commercial interruptions. If you're into classic horror, ghost, and adventure stories, I narrate Nightshade Diary, and you can find links at nightshadediary.com. If scary stories are your bag, and listening to encounters with cryptids, ghosts, dogman, and other weird creatures sends a shiver up your spine, then go to supernaturalstorytime.com for links to our weekly podcasts. Noteworthy news about the paranormal world, true crime, conspiracy stories, and anything that is just plain weird can be found at eerie.news or visit the Stranger Than Fiction Stories tab at miamighostchronicles.com. Please subscribe to my newsletter on Substack. Just go to mpellicer.com for a link. I want to thank you for being part of my audience, and I think you are all wonderful. So how's everybody doing? Did you notice how I kind of messed up my intro? It's like I'm hitting the wrong thing. You know when you're trying to multitask and you do it wrong? That's what I did. But anyway, guys, everything is good over here. We're in high summer here in Florida, and it's hot, man. I'm telling you, it's hot. Every time I'm going to do something outside, it's like I got to think real hard, good and hard about it. Okay, I know I'm a native Floridian, and believe me, I'm used to even humidity worse than what's happening. God, I don't know. It's hot. And it's like I either go out in the morning or like right about now, it's a little bit over after 7 p.m. here, because you go out there and it's like, what? And I'm like, yeah, what can I say? I become a wimp, like the AC is my best friend, but what can I say? So anyway, let's get on to the good part. The good part is who the guest is tonight. This is the first time this gentleman has been here on Stories of the Supernatural. His name is Dennis Gilmore. And he was born in Tisdale, Saskatchewan. He's going to have to tell me how to pronounce this, Saskatchewan. And graduated from the University of Alberta in 1991 with a Bachelor of Science in Pharmacy. While working on his book, The Unveiling, he obtained a degree in computer programming and combined both these work interests into a career producing pharmaceutical software used across North America. Dennis is a Christo-evolutionist. His faith is one that seeks to merge science with all of the spiritual concepts common to the God of the Bible. When not writing, Dennis enjoys skiing in the hills of Whistler, reading and pondering the ancient mysteries of life. Who are we? Where did we come from? And what is the meaning of life? Dennis currently lives in Medicine Hat, Alberta, and is working on his next sci-fi novel. Help me welcome him. How are you doing today?
Good, thank you.
Dennis, let me tell you, when I was looking at your website, I was like, I don't know where to begin with you. And like I told you before we started recording, how did you come upon the ideas? Was this something it was your family? Did they instill these beliefs in you? Something that happened, a triggering event, or you just went there after you studied certain things?
Yeah, just a lifelong process, not really understanding. Like my dad was sort of a Bible student. They're sort of an offshoot of Jehovah's Witnesses. Mm-hmm. He didn't really teach us much or try to push it, but you absorb stuff like that, being around that kind of teaching environment. So really kind of had an understanding, respect for the Bible, thinking that's the Word of God, but as if it was dictated on high from Moses. But having more matured in life experiences, you realize I don't take it so literally anymore. But as a young boy, I also remember really being fascinated with the classic Star Trek, right? And the idea that God is always there as a highly evolved alien of some sort, or some aliens with some advanced technology, and they just seem to be omnipotent. Or like in the Next Generation, Q, the omnipotent Q could snap his fingers and do anything you can imagine God would do. So as a young boy, it really animated my imagination. There was this internal conflict, I understand now, between the God of the Bible and what's that all about versus this idea of evolution. In Canada, where I live, that idea is quite prevalent, as the scientific theory is evolution has disproven God, and it caused that kind of. I've just always been fascinated with that idea, and that's why I wrote a book. When I was in university, I got inspired with the idea to write a book called The Unveiling about highly evolved alien beings openly reveal themselves to mankind, and there's a struggle in the world to trust these aliens. Are they really highly evolved aliens come to help us, or are they demons? That's the Christian sort of idea there. So the whole world is in that conflict, and that's what my novel was kind of about. I wrote that back in 1995 or so.
Okay, so it's been a while.
Long time ago, yeah. A long time to mature and think about it, because it wasn't a big success. I set it aside, came back 7-8 years later, reread it, and saw lots of ways I could improve it and change it. So changed it, improved it, eventually self-published it. It's available on Amazon, The Unveiling, or you can go to my other domain, theunveilingbbook.com, and you can get various links.
So, in other words, but I'm going to tell you something. Even though you said you wrote this in 95, and I know that's always been around, recent events point that it's very on the minds of a lot of people nowadays because
it's coming out now,
UFO disclosure and all this other stuff that's going on, presently, as a matter of fact. And you're exactly right. People now are like, are they, first of all, is it true? And if it's true, are they friendly? Are they not friendly? Are they going to help us? Are they demons? I've heard of that version also.
Right.
And as you said, when Darwin came out with evolution, there was a big problem with the religious, hierarchy, because to them, it was like, hey, you're trying to say that God, that thing, the Bible version of the creation of man, there's nothing about evolution there. So I've read that was a problem when he was going ahead with his theory.
Yeah.
And let me ask you, what do you think about, let me ask you something. What do you think about, and the reason why I say this is for many, many decades, people that have come out and talked about either sighting UFOs or aliens, whatever, they've kind of been poo-pooed, kind of, even by academics, like, one of those kooks. All of a sudden, that's not the thing anymore. All of a sudden, they're like, everybody's interested, as in government figures. And it's like, why now? What happened?
Right.
And all of a sudden, you've got this interest in it. What do you think the source of that is?
Well, there's definitely something there, right? And that's the quintessential problem. Who is there a creator who created us somehow, just like fiat money? They just out of nowhere, bang, and here we are, like omnipotent Q on Star Trek, snap his fingers and create some sentient thinking being. Or did we really slowly evolve over millions and billions of years, as the establishment wants you to believe? I mean, that's how I was indoctrinated in school. Evolution. And then all these sci-fi shows like Star Trek really animate and force that in your imagination. So I really did lean that way for a long time. And the first third of my book or so is sort of about that, right? But then the conflict as the world starts to realize, the whole struggle, is there a creator, and what's this creator about? And so the book is sort of a fictional tale of my own sort of inward struggle, right? But having set it aside for many decades and thought about it all more, I've come to be more of a simulationist, the simulation theory. I think Trump's evolution theory, right? And that's a very common meme today. In a highly complex simulated reality, a video game, for example, where you got avatars and you're manipulating the avatar with your joystick, that obviously requires some sort of intelligence to build that, right? Right. So, and you could alter the memories of your avatar in the game, give it some amnesia. This is sort of how I see humans now. We're here with amnesia, a bit of a consciousness of our higher selves, our higher God selves is transferred into the avatar of our bodies in this simulated reality, right? So to me, if you're going to believe in evolution or simulation, how are you going to combine the two? One has to kind of trump the other. Because if we're just slowly evolving over time, how is that possible? That's the quintessential human dilemma. If you want to believe evolution, it's so mind-boggling complex. DNA code. I used to program computers. Program code can be very complicated, but it's Mickey Mouse compared to DNA code. So there has to be some sort of creator. And whoever created us now, I see, is the same as these UFO beings, these UAPs, they call them. All this is coming out now.
Right. Another UAPs, right.
Yeah, if there is an open contact, they would have to admit there's some sort of creator that they're trying to understand too, or they are the creator. That was sort of the struggle in my book, right? Which is it?
Right, exactly. And as far as I know, and I mean, I haven't, from what I understand, as far as human remains, hominids, they really have never found that so-called missing link, the one that supposedly and as far as into modern man, and even then, I understand that in some cases, there's even been like Piltdown Man. Basically, it was a hoax where they had
there's been lots of hoaxes and stuff down. The establishment wants us to believe evolution, no God.
Right. That, and of course, your your regular layperson sees this skull and an academic saying, this is the skull of this evolutionary on the way to man. And most people go, oh, okay. You know, nobody knows enough about, you know, what they're seeing to realize that. Well, I think it was the Piltdown Man. It wasn't a baboon. Part of it was a baboon. That kind of like constructed it together. And that's the thing, that we have these academics that say this is what it is, and everybody's like, okay. And then, you know, like you say something so many times and time goes by, basically becomes the truth.
Yeah, propaganda. Goebbels said that. Hitler's Goebbels.
Right.
You repeat propaganda enough times, it's unprovable, it's subjective, but if you hear it enough times, you just start to believe it, right?
Exactly.
And that's what it is in Canada, United States. I don't know if the United States too, the educational system pushes evolution, right? And the kids just start to believe it.
Of course. It does. There's, you know, regardless, you know, whatever the of course there's the separation of church and state, and you know, I went to Catholic school for 12 years, so. But even in, and I'm gonna think, you know, I was always taught as far as Catholicism, you know, as God the Creator, you know, the version of the Bible. You know, even though I'm not gonna say how's this? They never said evolution doesn't exist. How's that?
Right.
It's like, we're gonna concentrate, but they never said this theory of evolution is not valid. They just never went there as far as the science instruction.
Right.
And yes, but absolutely, like in public schools, as far as the curriculum, yes, part of the science is evolution, not only for man, but for all, you know, animals, dinosaurs, they died, you know, mammals, you know, to what we got right now. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. And, you know, there was lots of struggles. You know, I've investigated and come across some, you know, it wasn't accepted right away. Evolution, of course, there was controversies, and the powers that be or shouldn't be, maybe this global elite and stuff that I've investigated and found out about, the cabal and all these names, the deep state, all these mysterious terms. They've infiltrated, as I see it now, the education system, and they just won't let you talk about anything but evolution because they want to deny any kind of creator, right?
Right. Unless you're paying for private religious school, you're never going to get that version. In a regular public, what we call here in the United States public school, which is, you know, majority of students go to, unless, you know, the parents, and you do have private schools that are secular, but no, absolutely. Especially now, I want to say everybody stays away from that, like a 10-foot pole. They don't want to go there.
Right.
And always on the downside of anti-religion.
Right.
And anti-Christian religion, by the way.
Right.
All right. That's the main problem that you see with the hands-off, that nobody wants to, you know, if in schools, like, no religion, especially if it's, well, you've seen it, you know, what was that coach that he got vindicated not too long ago, that he was praying, I think, at one of the football games. And this was just a football game or something like that, I believe, here in the United States. And he either got fired, something. Finally, the courts backed him up, and well, he came out okay. But again, he had to go through something that was very commonplace. How's that?
Yeah.
All right. Something that's holding a prayer like before a game. That's
right.
That's at one point that nobody ever thought twice about that.
Right.
And it's become controversial, and like you were explaining, and of course in school, and I'm sure you've seen it in Canada as well, that everybody now is very concerned about what's happening with the kids, the children, as far as how they're being brought up in our society.
Right.
You know, because of course they're going to become the adults of tomorrow.
Right.
And there's a lot of, because exactly what you described, what are they being exposed to as far as academics, as the truth that, and in some cases, I can imagine even in some cases, some of these kids might be in a problem where they're hearing something at school, for example, in the classroom, and then they might be hearing something different at home.
Yeah.
From the parent. And they're like, huh?
That causes confusion, I think, cognitive dissonance and confusion, and it sort of creates a mild form of what multiple personality disorders. You put on this hat at church. I'm going to have this morality at church, or, and then in school I have this kind of morality, and it causes confusion in the kids. I don't think it's good.
Of course not. Of course not. It's not. It's not. But that's why I was saying so many things have, like, let's say even since 95 when you wrote your book, so many things have changed, like the UFO, which, and I guess it's like what you said, you could look at the topic and say, well, this is concerning UFOs, but if you go into it, there's more behind the reason maybe why that's becoming more important, or they're talking about it. Or you have, at least in the United States, all of a sudden you have congressional hearings about UFOs, and it's like, wait a minute. Nobody was ever believing anybody that said they saw anything, even supposedly trained observers like pilots.
Yeah.
From what I understand, and I've talked to several people, police officers, they were told, if you ever see anything, you better shut up, because that's a career killer. If you ever start saying that you saw a UFO or a light or whatever, zip it.
And some still did and lost their jobs or whatever. So that shows to me they're very sincere, at least in what they believe, right? Sure. That this was real to them. Otherwise, you're not normally going to get yourself fired unless you really truly are telling the truth, right?
Let me ask you, and I'm sure you've seen that show Ancient Aliens, which talks about, like, basically that we've had alien visitation going back maybe BC,
right?
Ancients. Do you think that that's accurate, or is it more modern, or do you think they left and they came back? What do you think of that the way it's been presented?
I've done lots of investigating. Like when I wrote the book, I had more of a traditional kind of Christian religious view, I would say.
Right.
But since, April 2020 kind of inspired me to start researching, going a little deeper, because that's when the Pentagon started to admit, way back then, that was the first official admission. There's there's some sort of can't be human craft or whatever. We don't know what it is. They're claiming anyway. And then there was, I did research on Lou Elizondo apparently back in 2017, quit because some committee some organization he was running the government wasn't being forthcoming. So he quit, and he starts talking about these can't be human craft because they have capabilities that human craft just can't do. And then so I started from there going deeper into research and finding out a lot of deep stuff because I was off the internet for a long time. Like, I wasn't really active on the internet and social media and stuff. I was like, I could program computers and I know how to do that, but I was I just wasn't active in it. I was just doing other things in life and sort of forgot about the whole thing. But that kind of inspired me to get back into it, and that's why I wrote my website, the redpilloftruth.com. Well, redpilloftruth.com. You can put the in front of it, the redpilloftruth.com. I own both domains. They go to the same place.
So they end up in the same place. Well, and see that's the thing. That's why I'm saying, and maybe it's call me a cynic, but to me it's like, it's almost like everybody's going, I wonder if the government is ever going to come out and fess up whatever it is that they found.
Right.
And all of a sudden, after so many decades of no, misinformation, they want to have hearings. And then there's some people that, of course, will say, no, all these sightings of all these crafts are the origins are here on Earth. You got that version, which is they're throwing out the UFO thing to cover because they have maybe back engineered, but in other words, that we constructed them. There's no alien in the craft. It's us.
Right. And that's sort of the conclusion I've come to, right? Mysterious beings with paranormal abilities. I've had some synchronicities and paranormals, so I get that, right? But it's not something consistent where I can like snap my fingers like Q and then make something appear. Like, so, having had a more expansive experience in life and doing more research and coming across websites where people have gone into some deep research on this, I've come to the conclusion that, well, those are the two possibilities. They're either angels and demons doing some mysterious work for God on the earth, or it's deep state technology. We're more technologically advanced in the past than we thought we were. This establishment wants you to believe we're just evolving and we're the most technically advanced we've ever been. That's nonsense. As I look into it now, I mean, who did the pyramids? That was either aliens or that assisted mankind, or we did that ourselves. We figured stuff out, and and we built those pyramids, and we were even more technologically advanced back then than we are now. We've become dumb and stupid and lost a lot of that through cataclysms. There's lots of evidence for cataclysm theory. There's actually a website I come across. It's not my website. There's a guy named Jason Brashears, archaics.com. Maybe you came across that on my website if you looked at it, because I've got some links. links to his
And
site.
what is the effects of these cataclysms as far as if they affected major?
Yeah, he doesn't believe in evolution. He's more simulationist, believes in simulation
Mm-hmm.
theory and cataclysms. And we were more humans. It's human technology doing all this. That's his basic summary.
Right. Well, you also hear now that they're having to change their dating as far as ancient civilizations, as far as, that they've always said this civilization existed in, let's say, 500 BC. They're kind of having to push back that time as far as when man was actually doing certain things. And again, we come back to if academics say, well, we discovered this in 1875, and basically they've said it after a while. Nobody's questioned it. And I don't know if it's because they have more advanced technology for dating stuff, but they're realizing that some of these dates for these civilizations are different. And like you said, in some cases, they were kind of dumbing down what these cultures, what these societies were doing at that time.
Right.
Come to find out, they were not. Well, and I imagine also like cataclysms, because sometimes people think of cataclysm as in a volcano, but something like the Black Death is in a way a cataclysm.
Yeah.
Where you have this huge wipeout of a lot of your people.
Yeah.
Okay. That's also a cataclysm.
Sure.
You have pestilence.
Yep.
Will, I'm sure you've heard, from around the world, they find these ruins of these huge cities that they kind of say these places were abandoned, but they can never figure out why they were abandoned.
Yeah. Archaics talks about that. Sometimes there have been evidence of a city being cataclysm, destruction on a city, but there's no bodies. It's like the people all disappeared, as in the traditional rapture theory of Christian rapture theory. So many anomalies like this. He spent a long time in prison pursuing his fascination about history and chronology, reading old books that were in the prison system. So he didn't have to work or have a family responsibilities, and he just had tons of time to go into deep, deep research. This guy has turned my way of thinking around because he knows so much stuff. He's gone back into deep history and put the whole mystery together pretty good, I think. Nobody has 100%.
And you know what? And I hate to say that, but sometimes that's really what's necessary when you're looking at these ideas. Like I said, you want to step out of, I'm not saying that all these academic theories or dates are wrong. I'm not. But sometimes you have to question them a little bit because it's like everybody's just, the next person is building up on the left, but nobody's ever really researched how accurate is that.
Right.
It might be accurate, but it might not be accurate. And like I said, sometimes they themselves, even now, like I said, you have these, like you said, either there was some type of destruction, whatever it was, and you're thinking, okay, were these people aware that this was going to happen and they fled? All right. But getting back to what you said, as far as what that does to advances in the, in the culture, as far as technology, it sets it back.
Yeah.
It sets it back tremendously.
Yeah.
Because, let's say, it's the smart people, everybody, if you have a volcano erupt, everybody gets killed, whether you're the smart guy, the mathematician, or the guy selling whatever on the street.
Exactly. You lose your ability to go back. Yeah.
Right. And same thing if you're the sickness, let's say like the Black Plague that they had, the Black Death in Europe, that got everybody sick, whether you were highborn or you were, a guy that was, the street sweeper. People were dying anyway, as far as your brain power. Exactly. But I had never thought of it that way. As far as, so let me ask you, based on what you're telling me, what do you think these aliens are? Are they interdimensional beings or not? What do you think they are? Or are they demons and angels?
It's a big mystery and a mishmash, and my ideas are constantly evolving. But right now, there's this ex-FBI guy, John D'Souza. Do you know about him?
Yes, of course. Yes.
He goes with the interdimensional theory. There's some sort of ET type beings, interdimensional, what traditionally in history and ancient books we would attribute to angels and demons. So I can see why you would look at it with a religious lens and say, oh, they're angels or demons. But whatever they are, I do believe in some sort of mysterious creator that even these beings are trying to figure out. So if there was an open contact one day and they say, oh, we're the only God there is, we're the highly evolved aliens, we're your God, I don't believe that.
Right.
They're struggling, whatever. They may have powers beyond us, but they're struggling like everybody, right?
Well, I've also heard that theory, and I'm sure you have, that there's more than one of them. I want to say species. How's that? Running around. That there's several, because as far as I'm concerned, one of the things I always, what everybody thinks is, are they here to help us, hurt us, or just observe us? And then you get the version of, well, there's more than one of them, and some of them are just going to observe us.
Right.
The other ones are tinkering with us and kind of friendly. You get that thing about where they turned off the nuclear sites, these bases.
Yeah, I watched that. There was a video about that I put on my site.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, but now that I've come to realize how convoluted and the deep state tentacles in every country.
Sure.
I mean, how never in history has there ever been a worldwide collusion and coordination of pushing some jibby jabby. I don't know if I can mention vaccines specifically on your.
No, let me tell you something.
C-19. Okay, we'll go with that, right? And it's polluted and pushed worldwide and still being pushed in Canada. That's never happened before. So obviously there's some worldwide collusion going on, and it's co-opted. Every fucking government. Sorry.
That's fine. That's fine. You know what? The truth is that really what's made this possible is the internet.
Yeah. Because
you get the media is basically you get information within seconds. No matter what part of the world you're on. I mean, it's really funny because you'll see some remote village somewhere, and you see the guy herding some sheep, but he's got his phone with him. So, exactly. And I think that what you're talking about as far as being able to affect the worldview of humanity, I want to say humanity, like cross borders, because of this. Yeah. To begin with, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
As far as shaping beliefs, expectations, fears. And like you said, behind the scenes, before it was like, hey, this country had this belief system and that country, and it was much more difficult to coordinate.
Yeah.
How can I say an agenda? How's that?
Yeah.
For a specific outcome down the road.
Yeah. So, these UAPs have been reported in all the countries of the world, Russia, likewise, I think they're coordinating some grand psyop to eventually openly disclose something like Dr. Stephen Greer. You probably heard of him, right? His press conference he had recently this month, where they talked openly, and the whistleblowers talking about, there's some sort of beings here with advanced technology, and we've reverse engineered it. The establishment wants us to believe that, right? Stephen Greer, he's all about ETs are all positive, love and light. There's no bad aliens. That's all deep state technology. That's all the bad governments trying to make you think the aliens are bad. I'm open-minded. I think that's a little naive. I mean, if we've got good and bad people, higher advanced beings can be good and bad. Angels and demons, that all a concept, right? Greer, even though Greer is a big wig, it seems a little naive to me. What do you think?
Well, okay. Part of me, how's this? It's really nice because us humans like to have that thing of these aliens are here and are going to save us from ourselves.
Right.
They're more advanced than us, and they're going to step in before we blow ourselves up or go into a nuclear war. That's very nice. It's a very nice, warm, fuzzy. And I wish, but at the same time, it's like, do I really want to gamble on that? All right. Or, and I'm sure you've seen or heard of that old Twilight Zone, that episode, which was the aliens come to visit and they say to serve mankind. And then at the end, the serve mankind was literally to serve mankind as a dish versus everybody was interpreting it.
That's funny, yeah.
As in to serve the mankind, to help them. And at the end, at the very end, how the Twilight Zone was always kind of like, it was kind of a downer. Right. One of them, he's leaving on the ship. He's thinking, I'm going off with the aliens because they're here to serve mankind. And somebody said, no, they need to serve mankind.
Actually serve you up, eat you. Yeah, like
in your mouth.
There's a movie, Visitors, was about that too, right? The visitors came to Earth and they're trying to make human food. Their food.
And we're such, and it's one of those things where you want to believe one thing, but then you're thinking, man, I can't go 100%. But then you see the flip side is like, do I really want to make war with?
There's truth in movies. There's truth in movies, right? There's truth drops there if you open your mind to see it.
And this is the thing I see it. If you, let's go with whether they've been around for 100, 1,000 years, whatever. It's like, I don't know. Sometimes I have these feelings like, what's taking them so long to either help us or not help us, or, like you said, Star Trek, the Prime Directive.
Right.
Prime Directive was that the superior technology was not going to interfere or affect a lesser advanced society. Basically, they were supposed to stay in the background.
Right.
And I'm thinking, were they doing that with us? But I don't think so. And then, of course, you get the ones that are saying, they've tweaked us genetically.
Lots of
And
theories like that, the Anunnaki or the genetic.
even if we weren't created by them, they've kind of like tweaked our genetics for whatever reason.
Right. That's the prevalent theory. Yeah. The Anunnaki, whoever they were, tweaked monkey genes and sort of propelled mankind forward. And yeah, I've heard lots of theories. It's confusing.
Right. It's like, and then you're thinking, I want to say personally, the way I feel is like, I want to keep an open mind, but at the same time, I don't want to. I've become very suspicious.
Right.
In other words, I don't want to go wholeheartedly because I'm afraid of being led down the primrose path, whatever it might be.
Right.
Because you're right now, I hate to say it. I think most people nowadays are very suspicious of the powers that be, whatever it may be, the governments, the media. It's like, man, I wish I could just, once upon a time where you believed in everything and anything, because they wouldn't do anything bad towards the rest of us.
Right.
Like the
I used to believe that. Not anymore. Not since C19.
And I think a lot of people are like, oh my God, it's like there's so much that's been shoved in our faces that now you can't stick your head in the sand. I'm sure there's people, but majority of people are like, no, I can't. And it makes people very hesitant or more questioning about buying into stuff wholeheartedly. Like I say, well, once upon a time, there was Walter Cronkite who read the news, and whatever he said, it was like, hey, Walter Cronkite said it. Now those days are gone.
Yeah, trust is gone.
Trust is gone. And I think that's where a lot of people find themselves. Is this UFO disclosure going to be used against us to scare us? Hey, the aliens are coming and they're going to get us, so we need to do XYZ, we gotta run the show now, as in the government, because the aliens are here to get us. Okay, or are they ever going to come out and say, you know what? Yes, it's true. We've known about them. Maybe we're just waiting for a better time. One of those deals, and we've back engineered stuff. I don't know. And then I'm thinking, if it comes to technology, I doubt very much any government is going to truly say all that if they have back engineered any type of technology, they're ever going to say to what extent what they have.
Yeah.
And then you get into the spiritual side. Okay. What is, if these aliens, are they interdimensional? Are they, let's put the demon word on it, because, the good ones, the bad ones.
Right.
In other words, instead of, usually you would have angels, demons over here, extraterrestrials on this side. And then you hear some theories where basically it's really the same thing depending on.
Right. Different frame of reference and way of, in the ancients, we would have called them angels and demons. Now we call them ETs. But I try to keep things simple at a high abstract level. I try to say, can I get agreement on whatever the complex issue is at a high abstract level? What's the real issue? There's either a creator or there isn't. Whoever created us, whoever that mysterious creator is, created these angels, demons, ETs, whatever, and humans too, or there's no such being, and there's some other explanation. And this is the dilemma.
Of course, the what if, or well, and now then, let's throw into the mix AI.
Yeah.
All right. That's another thing that we're facing nowadays, as far as, I don't know, how can I say, I'm sure you're familiar with the Terminator, where it didn't end so well for us with technology as far as AI.
Yeah.
Because it becomes sentient.
Right.
How can I say it? All these things, they always start out the reason why these things are introduced is to help us, but then it gets away from us and it ends up hurting us.
But as I've done a lot of research in the last 3 years now, as AI. Okay, I used to program computers, so I know the technology as it is right now. Computers don't think. They may seem really smart. My chess program may seem to be really outthinking me. It's just a complex computer program. Computers just do exactly what you program them. They can do. They're complex, and they every step you can take is programmed by a human being. They don't think at all. Okay.
Right.
So now this AI, it may be some new technology. I'd have to examine the code, but my mind
Right.
is only human. I'm small. I don't think humans have the capacity to create consciousness or some
Right.
sort of AI or some sort of computer that can get out of control and become sentient. That's imagination. That's the Terminator movie, which conditions our imagination to think so. But
Sure.
from my professional experience and training, computers don't think, they never will. That's a psyop. They want you to think so. So if
Right.
there's an AI seeming to talk like a human, it's one of these archons, these demons talking through the technology by some means, deceiving you, or it's a human on the other side of the planet.
Right. It was programmed to.
And they're just fucking with you. Sorry.
No, that's fine, because that's exactly what they're doing. And basically what you're saying is, no matter how realistic, how's that?
Yeah.
At the end of the day, it's just programming.
Exactly.
Maybe it's a very complex computer or programming to make it, because let's face it, we kind of like, and how was it? Was it in was it Asimov? He wrote a lot of his novels around this, robots going sentient.
Yeah.
And but I've also heard of that theory that no matter how advanced the computer could be, or robotics, between that and becoming self-aware, which is what everybody talks about. In other words, that's a chasm that, right now as it is, that's not going to happen.
No, not without an assist or illusions like in the movies to make you think so. Humans can create some complex program. I think that could be taken over by more complex beings, AI, like some sort of demons. If they're some
That's
sort
pretty
of,
scary right there, what you're saying, though, right there.
They could take over the program and talk through it and make you think so. And you're talking to a demon or whatever these ETs are, thinking humans, we're so smart, we create consciousness. No, they're just deceiving you. That's my take on it.
Well, let me ask you, let's go down that road. What would happen? Let's say you're the creator of this robot, or with this great programming, looks very human-like, even does the eyes, the eyelids open and close, and it's got the facial expressions, all the stuff that as humans are cued to respond to.
Right.
But at the end of the day, it's basically programming.
Right.
And it gets taken over by what you're saying. Let's say a demonic entity. Basically, it's going to get away from the person who did the programming, you think? Or you think how do you think that would work?
Yeah, I mean, the Terminator movie, that scenario is possible if humans get arrogant enough to think we can make some program and we're so smart, there's no God, but we're God and we create consciousness, then these beings, whatever they are, the real God might allow them to take over the technology, make you think so, and terminate us, or there's that big Terminator struggle, right?
Wow. Let me tell you something. That right there is, you think about that, and it's like, you don't know, for the people who want to look at it as strictly as a mechanical thing, and there's no spirituality or religion or God or demons or angels, but there could be another version to this, which is where what maybe started out as something man-made, strictly man-made,
right,
is basically taken over.
Right. As part of a test of mankind, or whatever this mysterious God is doing, it's a quintessential human dilemma from the beginning of how we ever got here, Adam and Eve, if that's where I was trained in the Bible, right? So from that time to now, that's been, is there a God? Isn't there? How do you know? What's the God of will? And what's God like? Or how did we get here? Those are all the struggles in the dark night of the soul. As you get old enough, you start to realize consciousness, I think, is really all it is. If you believe in quantum mechanics and how reality shifts, double slit experiment, according to our thoughts affect reality, we're somehow God ourselves. I think there's some truth to that, a bit of the spirit of God in mankind, every man or woman, right? And these are the philosophical things that people struggle with. But now we're in a world of such magical technology, our imaginations can go pretty much anywhere and believe anything, right?
Right. A lot of stuff that once upon a time was seen strictly as sci-fi now is stepped out of the sci-fi realm into possible reality in the near future. How's that? At the very least.
Well, as Tesla says, everything is energy, vibration, and frequency. If that's the case, and Tesla was right, I mean,
well, let's go with now that you said Tesla, with Elon Musk, that he's working on these brain implants that at first blush sounds really great because supposedly they're going to help people quadriplegic, people have severe injuries,
Right.
and it's going to help them basically connect their nerves to, and who would be against that?
Right.
All right. But I don't discount either people that say, okay, is that the beginning of a human, like a cyborg kind of thing,
Right.
where instead of it being used to basically help somebody that's had some type of injury, all of a sudden it's by choice. Hey, you know what? Remember like the $6 million man?
Yeah.
Okay. Where Run Better, you got the eyeball or the hearing
Right.
or whatever it was, that instead of it being due to an injury, you either, let's say, for war, basically you make a super soldier.
Yeah.
Right. Or, you have enough money that you can't think of anything better to do with it. So you go in there, you go, by the way, cut off my arms, and I want you to give me 2 of those super duper great prosthetic robotic arms.
Yeah.
And and then I could see that happening. Because it'll work.
Yeah.
Just the same as my original arms.
Right.
Once they put that link in my brain.
But I've become very suspicious of the human powers that be that say, trust us. We know the science is settled regarding C-19. No, it's not. It's not safe and effective vaccine. Tons of evidence coming out. If you're on the internet, the mainstream's never going to tell you.
Yes.
And so there's always the pretext. We're doing this for you good. What's the underlying real agenda? That's the part
that I'm very suspicious of. It's like, you know what? Once upon a time, I would have said, "Oh, that's wonderful." And now it's like, nah. You really want to help me? Sure. All right. Like over the side of a cliff, maybe.
Exactly. So what we're doing intentionally with the C-19, so Musk and all these super rich and powerful people,
right.
I'm not going to trust. You have to trust them that they've really figured out the science, and this neural link you're going to put in your head is going to help you, but it's also going to be releasing toxins to slowly kill you. And they know, I'm convinced C-19, that's what they're doing. So I'm not going to trust them. I'm just going to put
that in my brain. As a matter of fact, I was watching something that was talking about different, how can I say it? Not different versions of the C-19 vaccine, but in other words, that they doctored some let's say they were going to send to certain places where you could take it and nothing would happen to you. Okay. They would send another batch somewhere else and people would be like, okay, not bad. But then they could send another batch to a certain place that people were like, from the C-19, and I was, I had once upon a time, I thought of that, and I was like, man, can they control that? In other words, what the theory of what they're proposing is that they were targeting certain countries or certain areas for sending the version that was going to decimate the people that took it with very bad reaction as far as the body, that all these health problems would come up and basically the person would end up dead.
Yeah.
And I thought, man, that's horrible to think that they could target populations that way. It's a horrible thought.
Yeah.
And that opens again the Pandora's box to people realizing that, boy, that this thing of like love for humanity is like, not the more they, the people that beat their chest and say we love humanity is like, I gotta be careful with you.
Yeah.
That kind of deal. And do you think then that whatever's playing out, among us humans, if there's any extraterrestrials, if there really are any extraterrestrials, are they just going to stand by and see what we do? I was like, oh, I hope they figure this out. Or do you think that they're ever going to step in and help us out? Really help us out?
That's the quintessential question. In my sci-fi book, the aliens did openly show, and they had grandiose powers and explanations for what they're doing, but they turn out to be not so nice because I'm making a fictional story to dramatize these things.
It's plausible.
Plausible. I still believe there's some sort of mysterious creator, and there's issues being worked on Earth that we can only partly understand and theorize about. There's good guys, good ETs, angels, bad ETs, demons, right? Greer says they're all sugar and spice and everything nice. But Dr. Stephen Greer also insists we went to the moon, and I've done enough investigation on that to be very suspicious of that one. So this guy doesn't really seem to.
I'm going to tell you, I was one of those people. I'm going to admit it. Of course, we went to the moon. To me, I was like, oh, sure. And then after a while, like you said, you start thinking about it. And I've heard, when when the seed is planted,
Yeah.
then all of a sudden it starts to germinate. And I hear, you know what? You heard about this race to the moon, and we want to be to the moon, and all this NASA and all this, rah, rah, rah. And we go to the moon, and then we stopped. And you think, oh, why did we do that? You really think about that. If we went on and we actually went there and we stepped on there, and you could have said, okay, now are they going to build a base there, or whatever? I don't know. Why would they stop? And I myself couldn't understand that. It was like, that doesn't make sense. They spent so much money on the
going on with C-19, right? If you can establish something that's true now with the C-19, it's a psyop. It's not true. Why would you think going to the moon was not? It could be a psyop too. That's not true too. I mean, it's not logical, right?
Right. Well, to me, it was like, how can I say it? When it comes out, you're not saying, okay, this is beyond the realm of possibility. No, it's like, okay, you see all the televised and yes, and everything, and then but later on, I've heard of what you're talking about, which is like that wasn't even real to begin with. Our first landing there. Yeah. And why do you think that, or why do you think we never went at all? Not at the beginning, or besides for a version that we didn't really go as early as we did because we were doing that space race kind of deal with Russia and the Cold War. That later on we went, but you think that we didn't get there at all? Period.
I don't think so anymore. No, I remember even as a kid watching the lander take off from the moon, and it went up, and this lander, whatever the ship, whatever, I don't know, the Saturn V or whatever they call it, but it shimmied. And even as a kid, I'm thinking it's shimmying. That's pretty crappy science, special effects. But I'm just a kid. But now thinking back on it, go with your childhood, your childhood innocence.
Right.
Crappy special effects, right? But now as an adult, having investigated deeper, it's just a psyop, right? Why are they doing this? It's a great psyop going on for hundreds, thousands of years, however long you think you've been here.
Hey, Jin, come here a minute. Hold on. I have one of my dogs that he's decided that he's going to, and all my audience knows about my dogs. I have a very squeaky toy, and one of them just gets caught up with it. Jin, of all things, see, like I Dream of Jeannie and the Astronaut. Jin, their little dog. Come here, Jin. Leave that alone. Go ahead. Okay. Yeah, it's like, but anyway, keep saying that.
Yeah.
So why do you think that they faked it? How's that? Why do you think they did that?
They're instructed. The powers that shouldn't be, there's human powers that shouldn't be, who are in communication with the spiritual interdimensional powers that also shouldn't be. And which one are you going to listen to? This world's pretty much ruled by the dark ones, the dark interdimensionals, ETs, demons, whatever you want to call it. And they periodically somehow with technology or just manifest to their humans, subjects who are running the world for them. And they receive their orders from these evil ones. And then the evil governments collude and do their evil shit. It's all a great psyop to keep you down, keep you in a scarcity mindset, keep you fear of death, everything. Because, God, that's another psyop. God, a loving Heavenly Father is going to torture in little fire forever. Oh, wow. And yet God's a God of love. Caught in the distance there, like back and forth, and just keeps you paralyzed and not able to think. They don't want you thinking. They use you like the Matrix movie. It's my all-time favorite movie, the first one, right? Where Neo discovers that the machines representing these evil beings use humans, their energy, your energy, your fear, and all that. They love that kind of fear energy, and as a battery. Morpheus said they use you like a battery, right? So that's my ultimate. I could be wrong, but this is currently where I'm at. There's spiritual powers that be that control the human powers that be that then keep us all in a matrix of illusion and delusion and psyops and cognitive dissonance, mainly fear and wars and suffering and death. It's a death cult running the world, as David Icke would say, to drain your energy, your dark energy. That's their caviar. It's like wonderful sex to them, raping and torturing children and adrenochrome and all that kind of stuff. It's just they love feeding off that. That's the way I see it. And yet these things, there are powers higher than them, the angels and God. Why would a loving God allow this? This is the question that mankind struggled with for thousands of years, right? I've tried to answer on my website. I hope people go there. It's complicated, my theory and way of thinking. You'd have to read it.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Right. And, and people will always when you ask that question, and then people say, well, it's, human beings have free choice, as far as to choose one or the other. But then it's like, and I understand what you're saying as far as, but it's not a level playing field either.
Right.
Especially from, if you're being given these explanations or messages or directives from cradle to grave about what the world is or how you should live it, or exactly. And I do agree with you. I do believe that there's something called the industry of fear. All right.
Yeah.
Where we're constantly in a state of fear, more fear, or extreme fear, depending on what's going on. And of course, you get the release of cortisol in your brain. And that's a sustained level that does damage you. That's exhausting, as a matter of fact. And it affects your health physically, organically, and in your, your brain, your mind, the way you process. I don't know. You hear now everybody has problems sleeping or staying asleep. Everybody's taking melatonin.
Yeah.
And you think, well, some people say, well, that's attributable because people are on the phone and their minds are like never shut off. And I was like, no, I'm not quite on with it. I think that we were suggested, whether music or TV
Movies,
or
music,
anything,
everything,
whatever, we're constantly fed this apocalyptic kind of scenario to some degree or other, where we almost like live from one catastrophe or crisis to another. We're always almost, I want to say, in some type of crisis existence.
Yeah. They seem to keep trying to ratchet up the fear porn and send you down this rabbit hole and get you fearing this and that. And then you're more susceptible to suggestion, to what to do, and you give away your freedoms for the safety the government's always promised you. 9/11, I don't believe that anymore, too. I was naive. I see that.
Oh, no, I know. I was speaking to somebody the other day, and we were talking about, because I was at work. I mean, I remember distinctly what happened. And of course, and I give everybody because I lived it. You got to give yourself a break. At the beginning, everybody thought that it was exactly what was portrayed.
Right.
You're seeing these pictures. This is like incredible. And I remember everybody was wigged out because it was like, are there going to be more of these things? Are there going to be other terrorist attacks?
Right.
I remember I made a plan. I had my kids in high school, and I told them, and because what happens was I told everybody the phone lines went, where they were so jammed, you couldn't call anybody. And I made a plan with them. I said, if something ever happens like this, go to your grandmother's house, which she lived very close to their school. I will hook up with you later. That's as wigged out as people were, myself included. And then of course a lot of things happened. Laws were passed as far as restricting our freedoms. Based on the need to stop any terrorism. And it was like, and it's been downhill from there. And lately I've looked at not lately, it's been a couple of years, that I started looking at these alternative explanations of what happened in 9/11.
Yeah.
I remember the first time I saw the video, I got a headache. You're like, I don't know, man, this is the truth, but this is, God, that's horrible if this is accurate. But let's face it, at least myself, I'm the kind of person I'd rather deal with the truth, as ugly as it might be, versus than being fed this line of. And then if you think, well, if this was not accurate, and that's pretty horrible, how many other things or situations have we been brought into, as a country, as a world, as a town, whatever, us thinking that it's something else, and when in reality, it's like you said, you've got somebody or collective, somebody in the back pulling the strings, is like, we're going to do this because this is what we want to have happen. And maybe it might be a 20-year project. How's that? But we're going to start doing it now. What do they say? What's every generation? Is that with 20 or 25 years?
Yeah, 20 to 30 years, because however long it takes you to really generate, to raise the next generation to maturity.
Right.
They say the brain doesn't stop developing to 25, so 20, 25 maybe.
Right. So, and I think that a lot of people have a hard time thinking, man, that's pretty like that Dr. Evil, like James Bond. I want to conquer the world, that kind of thing. And most people thought of it as just a good theme for a spy novel. And it's turning out it's not.
Yeah.
It's not.
When did you
And
start to question? Do you mind me asking, when do you start to question the 9/11 narrative?
I want to say like maybe 10 years after it happened.
10 years?
I saw a video that was, this is after, because everything right fresh after that, even for a few years, people, were wigged out really. They were like, man, if this can happen. And then I can't remember now the name of the video, and they were talking about all these things. And I remember watching it, and I was like, after I finished, I got a headache because I was like, oh my God. I don't want to believe this, but at the same time, you may not want to believe something. But then you're like, well, there's something here that doesn't make sense. And then after that, you start coming up on, and from what I understand, even fresh after the 9/11 explosions, there were people that were engineers and pilots, and people would say, that doesn't look right. But of course, nobody ever publicized that.
Right.
Because everybody was hyped up and everybody was scared and running around and, see something, say something, that kind of like,
Yeah, and there's so many questions. I mean, Building 7 fell and wasn't even hit by a plane, but mainstream media censors that. They don't want to talk about that. Apparently, it's just those iron beams melted because of a fire, which has never happened before in history. That fire,
that the supposedly jet fuel doesn't work that way. The type of burning or explosion and the way that these buildings basically fell down, pancaked.
Yeah.
That
like a controlled demolition. It fell that way.
Right. It just
merely
falls
fire,
down,
which is can never get hot enough to melt the beams like that. It's ridiculous.
Right. A bunch of things that it's like, you know what? At the beginning, when you see this, you're not going to take this apart. But even from what I understand, even back then at the very beginning, there were certain people, engineers, that were saying, that's weird. Or, like, what?
Right.
But nobody wanted to hear that. Everybody was so wigged out with what happened that it was like, and we could go back 1941, December 8th, Pearl Harbor. There we go there.
Yeah.
Everybody always sees, I've heard now, well, not now, before. You hear it on and off.
Yeah. Well, knowing how the powers that shouldn't be operate, I easily understand how Pearl Harbor, either they orchestrated
it, or that all of a sudden it's like, Japan attacking us. Maybe that wasn't so, how can I say, that was basically the push, between the shoulder blades to get the United States into the World War II kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it was orchestrated. And when you look at that, that's a horrible thing. And it was almost like this is what was needed for the people, the country to be behind going into the war. Because the United States had kind of stayed back and not gotten into it. And they wanted that. And they said, okay, it's gonna take something like a betrayal kind of scenario, attack on our soil. And of course, everybody was like, yeah, let's get into the war now. And I've seen several versions of that, and I'm like, God, that is a horrible thing to think of, that this was orchestrated. Because let's face it, a lot of soldiers that went to war, they thought they were being patriotic. How's that?
Yeah.
They thought they were doing it for the right reason. And it turns out that, can you imagine, that was all for nothing in a way? I mean, it gets very complicated as far as, well, what would have happened if the United States hadn't joined World War II? Was Hitler going to have kept going and taken over? Yeah, the big question. You hear all these different, what would have been the alternative, like, how you hear the alternate history kind of version? Was that something that was done that was necessary? And I'm like, well, still nobody wants to think that of us being manipulated.
Right.
Okay.
And how is it possible?
Right. Exactly. Well, and of course, it's possible. Well, back then, and then you think of, remember when Orson Welles did that War of the Worlds scenario on the radio, which was in the 1930s, right?
Yeah. That
people were actually believing, because, well, back then the radio was how people were basically listening to news and broadcasts and whatever, to the point that people thought that we were actually being invaded. Okay. because they could never understand. Yeah, it was like that. This was it makes you think, was that a testing ground? Was that a test run?
I think so. They do these things long-term gain. And how much more willing are people to accept the existence of aliens and ETs now, right?
Well, I mean, we've gotten both versions of the good ET versus the ET. There's like ET phone home, and there's Independence Day.
Right.
You know, War of the Worlds.
Right.
And it's like, where are we at with that? Because there's people that are like, oh, ET phone home, ETs are here, you know.
Right.
I mean, I've even heard I've read of people that are abductees, supposedly claim abduction scenarios, and they're like all good with it. And I was like, there's something wrong with you here. I'm sorry. if this is accurate and you're actually being abducted by an extraterrestrial, and you think it's all good because you're whatever, you've bonded with your extraterrestrial buddy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like I don't know. That's just something not right with that setup. I don't care. You know, that doesn't seem right. And again, what do you? Let me ask you. What do you think about extraterrestrial abductions, Dennis? Do you think they're accurate or what?
Two prevailing theories: it's deep state technology, and they're using holograms or some devices to deceive you, MK Ultra, whatever, to mess with your mind and make you think it's all humans doing that under the direction, I would say, of the dark ETs, demons, whatever you want to call them, archons,
right?
David Icke calls them, or they're legitimately the bad aliens coming in and doing all that. It's one or the other, right? Is sort of how I see it. And yet, I think the higher question is, why would God allow that? Isn't there angels supposed to protect? And what's the great narrative, or the grand, why a good God allows all this? And that's the real question that I ask myself. Makes you wonder.
The end all be all of all of this.
What's that?
What is the end all be all of this?
Yeah.
Because that's always really the way you look at it. Is it, are we alone in this whole adventure? Like nobody's got our back. How's that? Or does somebody do have our back? But part of it is you have the choices you make. You're allowed to make certain choices, and sometimes they turn out good, sometimes they turn out bad. And again, I think we always circle back to fear of being victimized. But the only reason somebody would fear, either as a person or as a group, to be victimized is that you have something or somebody superior to you that could victimize you. How's that?
Yeah. The fear, yeah.
Otherwise, because let's say once upon a time when you had like certain cities, this was whether you want to go into ancient civilizations, that would attack another city and maybe they would conquer it. But at the end of the day, everybody was human running around. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Maybe they had greater forces, whatever the case might be. But and then
was everybody really human?
Huh?
Was everybody really human running around? I mean, simulation theory.
Oh my God, that becomes like a whole.
There could be a guy next to you think is your buddy all your life. He's actually an NPC, a program, an illusion. You're the only real human, or a few people around you going into battle with your buddy, but he's just part of the program. I mean, if it's true now, why wasn't it true back then? What's that?
What about the hybrids? Are we going to throw some hybrids in the mix?
Yeah, hybrids, yeah. Well, humans have done that. Dolly, they've cloned Dolly.
Yeah.
While you're the sheep.
What I mean by a hybrid is, because you hear some of these people, these abduction stories, where basically they're saying, hey, they're farming, not just genetic material as in cloning, they're actually harvesting like eggs and sperm. In other words, like they're trying to do their own hybrid baby human ET version of whatever, which, that's one of the things that you also think, well, supposedly there's reasons some things are not genetically, you can't make it work, Right. That's why certain animals can't mate with other animals, because it's not going to work.
But they can do various experiments. If they don't come on
right.
If they can clone Dolly the sheep, they know enough. They could mix humans with animals and create some sort of chimera. They can do it with food, GMO food, right? They can mix. Yeah. I've eaten fruits that are a mixture of an orange and an apple. So
yeah, they're going with that now. Yes, exactly. The island of Dr. Moreau.
Yeah, exactly. Island of Dr. Moreau. Maybe That's another truth drop in there, right? He created, maybe these beings are like these angels, demons. They somehow modified animals to become sentient, and they're trying. In the island of Dr. Moreau, they turned on their creator, and there's that whole story about the demons turning on God, and there's some sort of great mystery there. That
if you go with the story, remember the way he controlled these animal humans was the law,
right?
Okay, and he had the law, and basically he had instituted all these laws, and that's how they all believed it, and they kind of did what he wanted.
Well, he had a machine too. He could push a button and cause them pain and suffering too.
Right, but he tried to manipulate them also with the law thing, the following the rules kind of deal.
Right.
And as a matter of fact, I was, but they always thought of him as being superior. Has that the father, that kind of like omnipotent kind of thing.
Right.
But I mean, you know what? There's a million rabbit holes we could jump down on this, Dennis. And that's the thing is like, I think a lot of people now is like, I don't want to deceive myself, but I don't want to overlook the truth either, because now anything is possible.
Yeah. Hurts the brain.
Well, it is. And, most people, it's like, I think at this point, I think people are just like, I'm what is it? I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired and fearful.
Yeah.
I think a lot of humanity now is like, oh man, come on. Let's leave this for like when there is a real major catastrophe, not like everyday living.
Yeah.
And I think that people get a little bit more centered instead of living on that hamster wheel of, okay, what's the next, whatever, apocalyptic end of the world, whatever, and then I'm sure sometimes I look at things and I go, that's not a problem. Well, that's a first world problem. How's that? That's not an existential problem. Like, my good shoes got ruined, that kind of deal.
Yeah.
And I think that, this last thing that happened now with the submersible, the Titan, the one that was going down into the Titanic.
Right.
And I've been following it. And they were saying that a lot of people, I myself included, find it hard to believe that there's people that would be spending $250,000 a head to go down there. And then you see the majority of people are basically, trying to keep their heads above water economically.
Right.
Where all of a sudden you realize, and by this, I'm not talking, I have nothing against people that have wealth. I don't have a problem with that. But that there's a big, sometimes a very big disparity, the lifestyle of one versus the other. Okay.
Yeah.
You're all worried about, hey, making ends meet, or my job, or my promotion, or hey, I want to buy a house, but what am I going to do? The normie thing. Yeah. And then you've got these people who basically bought $250,000 ticket to getting killed. Like nothing. Like, hey, I'm going to buy some football tickets, some season tickets to go see the blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, that means that, and I think because of the way things are sometimes with the economy overall, people are thinking, wow, must be nice. But again, that's no guarantee. Even that wealth doesn't protect you from making stupid choices.
Sure.
As as a matter of fact, today they published a story. There was another man with a son who turned this gentleman down. The Stockton guy, the one that was running the basically the trip. The guy had even discounted it, $150,000 only per head. But this gentleman apparently did his research and realized that some of the windows or portholes or something really had not been tested for the depth that they were going to.
Okay.
Basically turned him down, said, nah, him and his son. And then the other Pakistani father and son were the ones that went in there and then of course that happened. And again, great wealth doesn't protect you from bad choices. Really. Right. Bad choices. So what do you think is going to be coming up now? Let's say in the next couple of years. What do you anticipate is going to be the next move from the powers that be?
Yeah, that's a rabbit hole. I nobody can predict the future exactly. I think they're doing lots of misdirection and distraction, and they're coming out. It was like C-19, they needed a distraction. Now suddenly that's when the Pentagon starts submitting about UFOs, and then they flip to this, and then the war in Ukraine, and blah, blah, blah. And it's just all the lies and the psyops. I mean, I've investigated enough in the Ukraine war to know that's not at all what it appears to be either, right? It's just distraction.
No, you could. That's my point. That all of a sudden everything is global and big, and it's. Do you think when we talk about these powers that be, when we talk about these secret societies that have been around for a long time, or the mystery schools, do you think they're the same thing, or are we talking totally separate as far as who's in charge now or running the show behind the scenes?
Yeah, seems to be there's.
Do you think it's the same people all along?
The same people, yeah. I mean, Archaics goes into a lot of deep theory about that. Archaics.com. ARCH or ARCA. ARCHAIX.com. He goes into all kind of simulation theory. There's AIX, artificial intelligence X, which is equated to the devil, the demiurge, so the archons, and he goes into all that simulation theory. And he goes into deep history and showing how every 138 years there's a cataclysm, and it's too perfect in history. So
the timing.
He's deduced from the ancient records, separating the fact from the fiction, all these different ancient records he takes stuff from to show you it's too perfect.
Right.
In 713 BC, Jason Bashir from Archaics.com says the time changed. It used to be a year was 360 days. Now it's 365.25 days, which he's shown happened in 713 BC. The whole, and yet this phoenix comes every 130. He calls it the phoenix. It sets a cataclysm to set the world back, and that still comes every 138 years in the month of May, and it can't do that. Right.
Okay.
If the whole year changes, that's going to throw it all off as to when this phoenix comes. But the worldwide calendar changes, and according to the new worldwide calendar, 138 years, it still comes. So there's some sort of intelligence operating in this simulated
timing, concept. As far as the timing, which by the way, that's pretty scary, because if something can cause a cataclysm, that's like what?
Well, he predicts based on 1902 was the last reset. And 138 years from that will be 2040, 17 years from now. So
what was the one what was it in 1902 that he saw as a cataclysm?
Apparently it wasn't a big one, but there was some reports of the Phoenix causes mud floods and things falling from the sky, and there's some ships that they had to call all hands on deck on the ships to push all these mud floods off the ship, or it would have sunk. It wasn't a super big one, but there was some there's some of these things in history. And the newspapers, the microfiche from 1902 is gone.
Really?
Redacted, censored out of, but 1901, there's microfiche of what the newspapers were saying in 1903, but 1902 is mysteriously gone. So he goes in, it's his fascination. He's an expert on that stuff. I highly suggest go to the redpilltruth.com, because I've got some links to his site. The guy knows a lot of stuff.
You know what? I just looked up. You know what happened in 1902? Mount Pellicer erupted. And you know what erupted in Hawaii, like what, a month ago? Mount Kilauea. That they had that lava. Well, Hawaii is, it's got a lot of active volcanoes, but I got to look that up. That's really interesting. I had never heard of that. That's very, very interesting.
So he's predicting 2040 it'll be a major Phoenix return, a major cataclysm, almost to the point of resetting the whole simulation back to the Adam Eve simulation. He's got a theory. It keeps re-looping, right? And if you don't get you're not one of the errants, he calls them, and your consciousness will be re-looped back and go through another 6,000 years of this. I'm not interested in it. But if you can conceive and understand and hear truth in what he's saying, you're what he calls an errant, and you won't have to loop through back again. Personally, I'm not interested. I think this is my last time. I'm out of here.
Well, you know what? And the way I look at it is, for lack of a better word, it's kind of a little bit daunting to think that anybody, singular or collectively, could have that power to cause a cataclysm. But then there's another part of me that you see, well, they can control the weather, can they control volcanic activity, that kind of deal. And once upon a time, that would have been a great subject storyline for sci-fi.
Yeah.
Nowadays, people are going, well, yeah, kind of, but how much of is it sci-fi part, or as improbable or possible?
Right.
Hopefully not to be used, but wow, Dennis. Okay. So, well, let's see what happens. Let's see what happens. We're halfway through the year. I want to say that after 2020, everybody's had like a, it's been it's for the last 2.5 years, it's been a wild ride overall.
But the elite have been ruling for hundreds and thousands of years, if you believe history goes back that far. So they're well aware of the Phoenix phenomenon every 138 years. It used to be, it was kind of well known back in history, apparently, based on our Jason Brashear from Archaic says. But now it's like been scrubbed from our minds, our memories, and history books and stuff. And so I think ultimately they're probably, the powers that be are trying to misdirect and distract from the idea of 2040 reset, wars and whatever going on, CBDC, whatever scares you, to fear porn you into and corral you into the rabbit hole they want you to go in, instead of realizing 2040, unless consciousness of mankind doesn't change, 2040 cataclysm's coming.
Right, and that's the thing that, which is what I was saying. We get so distracted because we're continuously getting bombarded with all these major, minor things. War. This, that, and of course, the technology that facilitates is the internet, because we get instant access to whatever's happening with pictures, moving pictures. Like if you're there, what's that saying? A picture's worth 1,000 words.
Yeah.
As far as, going into the subconscious mind. And the reason why I say this is that I'm a hypnotist, and I understand the way the subconscious mind works and what messages we get in, depending on our suggestibility and what we take in as that we believe. How's that?
Yeah.
That we believe. Because you can hear something, if you have your filter down, you can say, well, you question it. But I mean, we could, there's so many ways of, as human beings, that we could get influenced one way or the other, even with just music. The beats of music will put us into different levels, in our brains. And we're pliable. We're very pliable.
Programmable. Mark Passio calls humans programmable species. I don't know if you know him.
We are.
Have you heard of Mark Passio?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
He's quite an interesting fellow.
Yeah. We are. It has been absolutely fascinating to speak to you, Dennis. I want to thank you. What are you said? You mentioned something that you're going to be writing another book, or what?
Well, mainly it's on the internet now with my websites there. If you go to the redpilltruth.com, I've got other domains that link to other creative writing and whatnot, other domains that I've written, various creative things. So that's where I put it now, because my first book, I self-published it, and it didn't make a ton of money. So now with internet technology, it's so easy to self-publish or do a website and just give it away for free. It's sort of what I do now. Okay.
So are you going to stay in the fiction realm, or are you going to go into nonfiction?
Well, my sites, I've got a bit of both fiction and nonfiction, as I've done investigating. I put a lot of videos on there from other people, trying to put sort of my grand theory together of what I think about it all, right? But I got a question for you. The internet, right? In Canada here, there's so much censorship going on with Bill C-11 and C-36 and social medias, and they might get to the point where they're censoring domains, and you can't even have my domains anymore. So is that a concern?
I wouldn't. I think that's definitely very possible. I believe that at some point that's very possible. That's going to, and let's face it, I think people are waking up. Well, what happened with Canada with the truckers and what they did with
that helped wake me up and set me off to investigate more earnestly. Yeah.
Yes, and I think a lot of people are going, "Huh? They can do that? They did it. They did." To some people, it was like
easier. How much easier if they get CBDCs, which they're pushing now, to turn your money off with the click of a button, right?
Right, exactly. And I think to a lot of people, it was like, it's really convenient to be able to go and pay with your debit card or whatever, because basically that's the way everything works. And then we never go down the what's obvious is that they can control this. They can switch this off, because basically you do not have any money in hand like before once upon a time. This is only as good as, if you log in and, there was a movie that came out maybe 15 years ago, Enemy of the State, with Gene Hackman and was it, Smith, that basically Gene Hackman plays kind of like the guy that the deep state's after him.
I saw it. They remember something about something.
And Will Smith plays this guy. And basically, all of a sudden, he has this, and you're looking at the story, and it's great, but he gets all his money disappears, his credit cards don't work, and he's like, "What?" And when you looked at it, it was like, "Oh, that's a great movie," and everybody's like, "Man, that was pretty accurate."
Edward Snowden type stuff, yeah.
Right. And now a lot of people are realizing the credit cards, as far as the money, even your vehicles, as far as, being able to shut them off. I mean, I know a lot of people are saying, "Oh my God, that's over the top." But it's like, I'm sorry. Once upon a time, I would have thought that's a great novel right there, a great movie. But nowadays it's like, well, you know what? It's a pretty awful truth to contemplate, but that's a possibility. Most definitely. I could see that. That would be the end all be all. You can't go here, you can't go there. That money that you have, it's only as good as we let you have access to it.
Well, China, they've got the social credit system tied to their CBDC, which always comes. CBDC always comes with social credit to manipulate, control everything you can think, say, or do. Say anything about the government, like the truckers, they just click and you're done. I mean, yeah.
Right.
Scary.
And I remember people were like, or what happened, I don't know if you remember that they, people that had given them, what was it? That giving them money, that given donations, they were going to take them away and not give it to them, and they were going to keep it. All of a sudden it became, and everybody was like, "Wake up, folks!" Once they can control this, so a lot of people had like what we call it a coming to Jesus moment with that.
Right. But I think it's more distraction. I mean, CBDCs, there's always dangers. Keep alert to the danger, but wherever mainstream or whatever the chatter is, you got to fear this, you got to fear that. Usually that's not the case, right? They're distracting you. A decoy, a distraction from the ultimate 2040 reset. I think Jason's onto something on archaics.com.
I got to follow up on that. Again, thank you so much, Dennis. It has been wonderful to speak to you, and I want to wish you the best of luck.
Can I ask you one question?
Of course.
So, in regards to the CBDCs, and there is some danger there. Do you believe like Bitcoin, these kind of things, decentralized currencies like that are an option to pursue?
You know what? Part of me, how can I say this? The theory of Bitcoin is very alluring. I understand it. I get it. But let's face it, when you don't have anything in hand, and I'm going to give you an example. I was born and raised in Miami in South Florida. We always had the threat of hurricanes, and I had lived some very difficult ones. No electricity. Nothing worked. Okay. If you didn't have cash in hand, you couldn't get gasoline. You couldn't do anything. All right. So my problem, I think, also with Bitcoin and stuff like that is that the methods of transacting with it could also be manipulated. How's that? Or stopped.
Right.
Or,
Well, some countries have adopted it. El Salvador has adopted it as an official currency, Bitcoin.
Right. Exactly. But we don't live in El Salvador.
But the idea is any country can do it is the idea. I mean, United States.
Of course, any country could do it. Any country could do it. But the thing is, again, how's this? I hate to say it, but it's almost like I'd be surprised that the government would back it, because if they did, that means that they would be able to control it, because I don't think they would back it if they couldn't control it. How's that?
Right. And that's why I kind of, think sometimes I should go move to El Salvador and get the fuck out of Canada.
You look at, now, let me tell you something with that guy, with that new great prison he's got for those, that gang prison, that 40,000. I was like, man, hats off to that guy. They painted these gangs like, oh man, they're the Maratrucha, the MS-13s, like, and he's got them with little hands on each other's shoulder and their undies. It's like, man, he knows how to do it. He knows how to do that. Yep. I don't care how many tats they got.
Have you heard of Quartal.org, Quartal Network?
Quartal? No. What is that?
Yeah, if you go to Quartal, QORTAL, I think it is, .org.
Uh-huh.
It's a internet infrastructure replacement project.
Really?
Yeah, I talked to the founder, Jason Crow. I talked to him, and I'm a programmer too, so I talk his language. I understand what he's trying to do there. It can actually entirely replace the internet. So I just mentioned that as a safeguard. Look into it. Maybe we'll recommend it to your viewers, because if they ever do censor the internet, if they ever censor the internet totally, you want to go to a different network, this can do that. And it's totally decentralized. You cannot. it's technically
That would be
impossible.
great.
Technically impossible to censor anybody there.
Which that's, you know what? Let's not even go. Like you were saying about, if they can control your domains, what URLs that you use. Let's face it. If you click on it, it's not, that it won't take you to the site. If we say, nah, that site is not good, we said it can't, and nobody can go there.
That's the problem. This current client server model, they just the government just orders GoDaddy. That's a common centralized server.
Right.
That we don't like that domain. That's misinformation, disinformation. Click of a button, you're shut down. But on Cortel Network, it's all decentralized. Your own individual computer has what you need, the program and the files. And once it's downloaded, it cannot be censored. Actually, it's technically, they've engineered it such that it's impossible to censor, even if the government ordered them.
Basically, from what I understand, some of these problems have come in because of the servers and who has control of the servers. And, let's face it, that's why, a lot of people, when I say a lot of people, whether they're whatever, it's like when the internet became active, nobody really ever thought that they were going to do this.
Yeah.
But let's face it, everything is information. Like I said, that now everybody can access the information instantaneously.
Yeah.
It's a double-sided sword for the powers that be.
Yeah.
It's great for manipulation, but at the same time, you're allowing your populations to be exposed to alternative ideas. And I think that's where the problem comes in.
Which stretches your imagination, wakes people up. You start thinking, connect the dots. Yeah.
You hear about EMPs, electromagnetic pulse, where let's say everything goes up. And then part of me's thinking, well, yeah, that could happen, sure. But then I'm thinking, part of me thinks they would be out because that's it. The way of them communicating with you and pushing through their ideas is gone also.
Right.
All right. If you have no access to electricity, of course, the internet, whatever, that's it. And plus, if they're doing any type of monitoring, that's gone too. Yeah. And you know what people do when there's no internet? People go outside and talk to each other.
Right.
And the reason why I know this is because I lived through hurricanes, which is a much smaller scale of what that is. But when there's no electricity, and I lived like in '92, I lived through Andrew, which ran over everybody, and where you got neighborhood people to get together and guard each other's house, and people running with generators, and so I know that what happens is if there was ever an EMP, it has a lot of problems that come with it, especially if you have health problems, whatever. But I'm always thinking, I'm always divided on whether they would let that happen, because there's a downside for them as well.
Yeah.
If we're not hooked up to the internet.
Yeah. I mean, I've wondered, I've gone down the rabbit hole. Do they even have nuclear weapons? They've got mother of all bombs, Moabs that can do a mushroom cloud, but is that not nuclear really? They're just more fear porning, more. You
think so? Wow. You know what? I've never thought of that, because, you always think of even now, what's going on with Ukraine and Russia and China, and everybody's like, oh my God, nuclear war. Whoa. This is like a extinction level thing if this gets out of control with nuclear weapons.
Right.
But if you think, that's interesting, that concept.
Hiroshima and Nagasaki, if you look at the war footage, it just looks like it was carpet bombed with a lot of bombs. It doesn't fit what a nuclear bomb would totally. I mean, rivers and buildings are still there. It's like there's a lot of questions around that.
I know. Recently I heard of that, and I was like, what? Nagasaki? What? You mean that really wasn't a nuclear blast? What?
It was just a Moab. I think it was a Moab. It gave a mushroom cloud, so we have that evidence. And when they looked at the mushroom cloud, but it didn't do what they say a nuclear bomb would just totally decimate. There wouldn't be buildings standing, rivers still there, and all this kind of stuff.
Yes.
And wouldn't there be radiation there for hundreds of years, and yet they went back real quick?
See, that's another thing. I've never gone exploring, but I had heard something that the radiation supposedly it's not accurate as far as.
And like Chernobyl, the big radiation leak in Chernobyl, and how quickly did they go back there? I mean, it's all just bullshit, I think.
No.
I'm not a nuclear physicist, but I can connect a few dots. It's bullshit.
And you know what? And you know what's really funny? I remember one time, what show was it? It was this guy. It's one of those fishing shows. God. And I watched it. He was one of these guys that was going to fish all over the world. And I remember one of the time, Marlene, I can't remember his name. Anyway, he's an interesting guy. He was one of the times to fish in one of these rivers or streams by Chernobyl, you know. And part of his thing was, let's see what he could catch, and that they were going to tag it and also take a clipping just to see if in the tissue of the fish there was any sign of, you know, not radiation, but some type of genetic mutation due to the radiation. And, you know, you think of it and you go, well, why not? But then you could see the manipulation, because basically that's reinforcing that original idea of the meltdown in Chernobyl and X, Y, and Z. And, you know, by the way, which back in the 70s, they had a lot of sci-fi movies built around all these genetic mutation of animals because of nuclear contamination of some type.
Yeah.
Or chemical. Let me tell you something. That's a lot to portray. Let me tell you, it's like I want to become an aesthetic and go live in the mountain or something.
Yeah, yes. Back to nature. I you know, there's something to that, right? Technology can be a wonderful tool and aid as long as you don't let it get out of control and you maintain community and connection with nature and stuff. Like you say, the hurricane would, you know, if they shut down the whole internet, people would start communicating on a local level, getting to know your neighbor, and that's not what they want. They want you stuck on your computer.
Well, that's why I'm saying that sometimes I think of that, because I hear of, there was an EMP attack, and then it would make life a lot more difficult, but at the same time, people would be forced to like go out there and talk and coordinate, and what are we going to do? And hey, you know what? Because I saw this in neighborhoods where the electricity was going to be gone for a while, and back then, you know, people were pulling out generators, and they had basically groups inside, especially like some of the developments, or basically they were guarding so that they wouldn't come and vandalize or loot any of what they had left.
Yeah.
And people coordinated because they had no choice. And this was back in 92, you know, but I could see that happening all over again, as far as if people, you can't, you know, there's no internet, no phone, nothing. So, yeah.
That would force people to get to know each other and work together at a community level, which would transform society ultimately for the good. So, yeah, I don't see them ever shutting the internet off entirely, because within a month or so, people will be off their addiction of social media and say, that was nonsense. I don't want to do that anymore. And that's not good for them, the controllers.
I remember when I grew up, I knew all the families on the block on both sides. I knew, we didn't know them intimately, you knew, so-and-so, they lived in the corner over there, but in the other family, it's there. You know, everybody knew who lived, and you talked, and I don't think that happens that often, unfortunately, anymore.
Yeah. So if they ever do start overly censoring the internet, I can see them doing that. They keep your the addiction going, right? But Cordal Network, put up another plug for them.
I gotta look that up, because
the internet for free.
Let me tell you something. I have heard of that, and I think that a lot of people would be looking at that, because, like I said, a lot of people overall have been saying, man, this could be shut off. Somebody could say, push a button and go, no more of that for you anymore. Sorry. But why?
You know.
No.
Well, yeah. I mean, I've got my domains at GoDaddy, and right. I was using up too much space at one point, and they just clicked the button and all my domains were shut down. So that's just an example.
I was with GoDaddy for many years, and I jumped ship. Ship because I can't remember what, and I said, no more of you. I had them for like over 10 years. I said, nah. And I went elsewhere. And the truth was, a lot of times you stay because it's familiar. You know, you're familiar with the thing.
It's a hassle to port over to somewhere new, but
they're
all the same.
Once I ported a couple of domains, I was like, okay, this is not complicated. You know, because I know how to do the DNS. I know how to manage the forwarding if I need to, whatever it is to my website. But yeah, and once I did it, it was like, all right, enough of you.
But any internet service provider has the same client server model. They're centrally controlled.
Exactly.
They can do the same thing. GoDaddy can do, any of them can do the same. Government says shut them down. Click, you're done. Just like your CBDC.
Now this is the thing.
Click,
Let me
you're
ask
done.
you something. If your domain provider is out of the U.S. though, or let's say or Canada in this case, not even in North America, they're not subject to the same.
Yeah, that's the only freedom you have if you can go get your new ISP outside the country, and that's unless they.
Yeah, I'm not saying it can't happen. By the way, no. I know that might not be the solution at all. I know that, but yes. I mean,
in the meantime, until it seems these governments have always colluded together, sort of the way I see it now, and C-19 proved that. So whatever disobedient country may be out there, they'll eventually get to you. Most of them are already working together, right? So I don't quite trust that.
Yes.
Coral network is still the ultimate solution, I think, where they simply technically can't censor it, right?
Right, and let's face it, sometimes if you're a smaller country and you're receiving money from whether it's the United States or any country, and all they have to say is basically, hey, you know what? Those millions or billions of dollars that we've sent over there or whatever, no more of that if you don't do what we say.
Yeah.
And guess what? That's the way it works. That's the way the cookie crumbles.
Yeah.
You know, especially some of these poor countries, which they're trying to build up their infrastructure and, you know, all the stuff that you need to like basically get your country up and going, you know, industry, whatever, have your population have something to work at. You know, have build roads, things like that. If somebody's funding that, all they have to threaten is saying, we're not going to give you that money anymore. And, you know, you toe the line. You go and you do what they're asking you to do. And that's unfortunate, but
well, the money is the biggest control mechanism, right? I mean, in Canada, a lot of people lost their jobs who wouldn't take the C-19, but most complied, right? So money they used to manipulate, right?
Yes, and well, but it's taken. Let's face it. In some cases, it's been reversed because it's been taken to court. But let's face it. Who could go 2 years without working? You know, in other words, to be reinstated. You know, and given back pay or whatever the case might be. Yeah, most people couldn't. You know, monetarily, they couldn't hold that financially. I can't be without getting a paycheck for that length of time. It's not feasible.
Yeah.
So yeah. It really put a lot of people in a bad situation.
As I've investigated these things, it really seems like a credible threat to me. They're trying to bring in a worldwide Soviet Union. Do you believe that is, in fact, what they're trying to do?
Yeah. You know what? Sometimes, how can I say? Part of me thinks that yes. And then I think sometimes they might run into a problem. You know that saying, all chiefs know Indians? Like sometimes some of these, everybody wants to be at the front of the line, and you might have, how can I say it? Whether you want to call it narcissism or psychopaths or whatever, they want to be the one. How's that?
Yeah.
They want the one, even though up to that point, maybe they got a group all trying to do the same thing but they're all thinking the same thing.
Right.
Yeah, I want to be the one left standing. So somewhere along the line, I'm going to get rid of these guys.
Yeah. But it's got to be, you know, I still ultimately think they're trying to misdirect and distract from the 2040 reset archaics.com talks about, right? Because I don't think, I mean, if they do another jibby jabby of a different type, you think it's going to work? A lot of people are going to just absolutely refuse, wouldn't you think? Or not?
No, I think a lot of people now, even people that before, they're like, hell no, I'm not. No.
So they'll come up with something else. I think they let go of that one. And it'll be something else, right?
Well, my fear is the UFO extraterrestrial.
Yeah.
You know,
John D'Souza says they're going to start. The UFOs are going to get aggressive and start shooting down airlines to get the fear pour going on that. The aliens are evil.
That'll work, by the way. That will work.
That'll get everyone distracted talking about aliens. Yeah, bad aliens.
And let's face it, if something can bring down an airline, doesn't have to really be alien sourced. It could be, like I said, something man-made that flies a gazillion miles an hour and zips and has some type of weapon on it that everybody's like, absolutely, that came from another planet or another whatever. And that will really put the fear of God in a lot of people, because that seems so. It's almost it's almost like the Japanese movies where you see the monster come up and you see the people running. That was like all these Japanese movies. That was the whole part of the majority of the movie was the little humans running. I think it would do that thing to people's brains where they'd be like, we're this size and that thing is, the monster, whatever it is we're like outmanned, outgunned, because we would be led to believe that that superior technology is not ours.
Yeah.
Or how could we do that to our own people? How's that?
Yeah. Well, if I think sometimes that if this simulation theory is true and quantum mechanics and all kinds of evidence is for it, the NPC concept makes sense, right? Not everyone in this reality is really human. I know I'm human. Okay, so
right.
If a plane gets shot down and it could be all entirely just to scare the true humans because there was nobody really human in that plane anyway. You know what I'm saying? There's human kind of psyops and there's what you call supernatural ET kind of psyops.
Well,
there's much more going on than we know.
Well, and of course, I mean, how would anybody ever know unless you work at the ME's office? If there's anything to be recovered as far as remains, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. But if you look at, to just give you, so Jason Bashir's wrote a book called The Lost Scriptures of Giza, where the number 1776 is encoded in the Giza pyramid in many ways, and also the number 138, which he equates to his theory that every 138 years, according to the ancient records, Phoenix comes. But also what famously happened in 1776.
Well, as far as the United States is concerned, it's the 4th of July, Independence Day in the United States.
Right. The American Revolution in 1776
exactly.
was encoded in the Great Period thousands of years before it happened. How can you make such an accurate prediction like that unless history and reality is much more simulated than we commonly understand, right?
Well, or manipulated is what you're saying.
How can mere humans manipulate that, right? But if the vast majority of people, so-called people in this reality, aren't even people and same as reality, it can be manipulated to such a precise degree that whatever's coming in 2040, if Jason's right, whoever is human in this reality better get their consciousness up to a high level and start thinking, or that's
well, you know what? It could also be, I'm sure you've seen that movie. It's kind of like become like a iconic pop thing. Or the one with Rowdy Piper, or whatever. Okay, They Live. I'm sorry. And there's a part towards the end where of course he's seeing them for what they really are, and he goes up, and you've got the humans that are basically know what's going on, and they're like, I'd rather be with them on this side than be used by them. In other words, they were aware that the aliens were there, that they were basically looked like humans, but they weren't. And they were helping them because they wanted to be on that side of it. Is like, I'd rather be with them, serving them, versus being manipulated by them. You remember, and that's also a possibility that you have humans that are like, they're totally human, but at that point, they're like every man for himself.
Well, I know I'm human, and I was much like an NPC years ago, but in the last few, C-19 helped to wake me up, and I'm much more awake and alert, conscious human being, right?
And I think that's happened to a lot of people, Dennis. A lot of people even that normally would dig in their heels and go, I don't want to deal with that. I think a lot of people have been forced into that position, some more than others. All right. But a lot of the stuff that I think that subjects or theories that before were like, that's really woo, that's out there, that's like, yeah, that's sure, okay,
There's a separation of the wheat and the chaff, I'd say, and the wheat needs to get together and raise their consciousness and start cooperating. And the chaff, just consider that maybe they are literally not even human. I'm not going to worry about them. You know what I mean?
You know what? That could drive a lot of paranoia. Let me tell you right there. That thing about, are you human? Like really, like that kind of deal. That's. Let me tell you something. That's a hard thing to wrap your head around. Believe me.
It is. I mean, I've watched a lot of videos from Jason Bashir's on archaics.com, and he goes in a lot of this stuff, and it is kind of makes the brain hurt, but it does stretch your imagination, your ability to think.
What's Ike saying? That all the royal family, they're really lizards or reptilians.
Well, if they're not human, I mean, they could change their simulated construct to look whatever, right?
Exactly.
I know as human,
I
I
mean,
can't do that unless I had some sort of holographic technology, whatever. Then maybe I could, but I'm just human.
right, exactly. Yeah, the original thing. Again, Dennis, take care. It has been absolutely wonderful to talk to you. Good
Thank you.
luck.
Thank you very much for having
Wow.
me on.
Of course, my pleasure. Take care.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye. You know what? A lot of people will listen to some of the stuff and go, oh, alrighty then. Which, I've said it before and I'm going to repeat it. I consider myself an open-minded person. And this is the thing. When you, how's this? When you entertain a theory or whatever, whether it's a theory or belief, whatever, doesn't mean you accept it. But I think you always have to leave yourself open to the possibility, what if? And I think before everybody was much more delineated as in, I believe this, I can kind of believe this, and absolutely not. And I think now, lately, with a lot of things that have happened, those lines have become a little bit blurred, because a lot of things that a lot of people are saying, absolutely not, that's impossible, that couldn't happen. The people wouldn't do that. People wouldn't do that. The government, whatever, the medical field. But no, they would never do that. People are seeing things that it's like, man, you know what? That was a nice thought, but that's not the reality of things. And I don't want to believe it. I don't want to think that's possible. Or whether it's, you call it disdain for humanity or for human life, or this, you know, how can I say, this insistence that whatever their, I don't know, their vision for the future is, doesn't include you or the humans, as in us humans. That's a hard thing, because I think majority of people would find that difficult to be that way personally. Yes, we have our psychopaths running around and our little sociopaths. They've been around all the time. But the majority of persons, if you told them, you know what, your vision of your future is you're going to do all these things to manipulate and maybe even depopulate the planet because whatever. Most people would be like, nah, I don't want to do that. You know, there's that wouldn't be part of what they would see as a perfect world or utopia or whatever. So for us, I think it's hard to believe that a person or any set of people could think that domination and these restrictions or anything could be any part and parcel of utopia. Most of us are like, nah, you know what? I'd rather go with the future where there is freedom and we've gotten technology and we've traveled to other worlds and maybe, you know, we've expanded, but despite all our technological advances, we're still very human. You know, we have emotions. You know, we're not like Mr. Spock, where emotions were seen as a detriment, that we're complicated and simple at the same time, even if we've been able to, let's say, travel to other worlds. I think most people would see the future. Yes, that maybe we've gotten smart enough to deal with certain diseases, poverty, you know, all the maladies of the human condition, you know. But it would never be at the cost of subjugating any part of humanity. I think the majority of people would never see that as a utopian future for humans or for the world. That's not part of our makeup. Because then what's the purpose of it all? Hey, you guys, cut it out. As you can tell, they're all having fun. Anyway, I hope you like this joke. I'm telling you. Talking to Dennis, I was like, okay, what else are you going to throw at me? I got a lot of great guests. Okay, hey, you guys. Come on. Bubba, cut it out. They're like kids. I'm telling you, they're like kids. They choose the most opportune moment to do stuff like that. But anyway, I hope you liked the show. I really had a good time talking to him, because let me tell you something. I think that extrapolating and thinking of all these different things and possibilities, and as far out there as some of them seem, why not? I mean, some of them maybe, you know what they say, hindsight's 20/20. You look back and say, man, I can't believe at one point I was considering that that's a possibility. And it turns out it's not. Okay, but at least we owe it to ourselves to keep our minds open, because like I said, just because you entertain something doesn't believe you're going to buy it wholesale and say, oh yeah, that's absolutely true. But you at least got to keep your mind open, all right, and examine things. Because some things, maybe they're partially right, not maybe totally, but partially right. And you take what you want from it and say, you know what, this is plausible, this is possible. I research it, and this is pretty accurate. And like I get, and I'm going to repeat it, we are creatures of our habit. The majority of us, even adrenaline junkies, even the people that, the routine is like, are you killing me with this? All of us like to have these fundamental truths of our lives to be stable, right? Because this is the world I live in. This is the world maybe I grew up in, that I exist, that I operate in. And when you start shaking that paradigm a lot, most people don't deal with it too well. They don't want to go there, that somebody comes up with an idea or theory or something that really takes it another direction. And people are like, no way, no. And it's at the core of it is we just want to keep everything the same as it is. There's nothing wrong with that. But let's face it, change is inevitable. Like I said, I think a lot of people that say, oh, I want things to be the way they were. A lot of things are worth preserving, but I don't think we'll ever get back to where we were, let's say, before 2020. The truth being, because, when you see something, you cannot unsee it. All right. So our new reality is taking the best from the past and moving forward. And sometimes changes, but it turns out to be a good thing. How's that? That in retrospect, as time goes by and you look at things, you realize, that maybe that those years or those events, which were very difficult and they were stressful, and God knows that when we look back at that, you go, it was difficult, but it was necessary. It was good. It served a greater purpose, that if it wouldn't have happened, or if it would have been delayed, it would have been worse. And I'm thinking that that's really what's happening now. Like I say, I'm a humanist. I believe in human beings. I believe in the goodness of human beings. And then in the end, we're going to triumph as we figure it out. Because like they say, we live in interesting times. So until next time, take care.